Welcome to the full walkthrough of all 11 devices in Modulators Plus. Modulators Plus comes as a self-installing live pack. That means you can just install it like the packs from Ableton. So you can double click it, or you can simply drag it into Ableton Live and then it will install. And then you can find it on the packs with all the devices. They do not automatically turn up under the modulators, so I would recommend to open the tag editor, select the devices, and then tag them with modulator. And then you can see they will turn up here as well. KeyMod lets you choose one of 12 pseudo-chaotic equations to generate modulation data for XYZ movements. And this data can then be mapped to 3 parameters anywhere in the live set. Here we've got the different equations, and here you can see a display of the XYZ movements. So first up, we can see the movements of XYZ here in more displays, and we can simply map by clicking and then choosing the parameter in the live set. I'm just going to choose parameters from the rack. And now we can just listen. And change attractors. Then we can decide if the parameters should be modulated. Then you can set the modulation polarity here, either bipolar, which is the way it's set now, or unipolar. And then you can set the modulation depth. So I can increase this up to 100%. You can adjust the speed of the modulation all the way from 0, so then nothing would be happening, all the way to 60 Hertz. And last but not least, you can also scale the whole thing, so everything together. So you can see the modulation now has stopped again, and it's increasing. EuclidLFO can be used to generate a periodic waveform from a Euclidean pattern. This waveform can then be used to modulate parameters, either in the live set, so anything on the track, or on other tracks as well. Any parameter really that can be mapped, and that includes third-party plugins as well. So we've got the clock settings here, and the clock output defines a ramp. So maybe let's first map this parameter here to the filter cutoff. We've got bipolar, which is set to, and unipolar as possible polarity settings. And then we also have the modulation depth. Again, goes from -100 to 100 again. And maybe let's just quickly listen. So here I can make the depth, and so how far the parameters changed as well. Let's set it back. And then the clock can be set in hertz or in note measures as well. So we can go from 0, which doesn't do anything then, all the way up to 40 hertz here. And then in note measures, it's not free as with hertz, but synced to the live set and tempo. And so we've got a rate from 64th note all the way to 32 bars. So you can make really long drawn out modulations with that. And here we've got the phase that can be shifted. With shape, you can move the ramp from a triangle to a sine wave and then to a square wave form. So here you can see now it's a triangle. And with skew, you can adjust the symmetry of the waveform. So in here we've got the Euclidean pattern that you can set. So length sets the length of the pattern in steps. You can set it all the way from 0, then there's no modulation happening anymore, all the way to 24. Then you've got events, that's the number of events in the pattern. So right now it's 7, so it fills everything, but like if I turn it down, you can see it now fills the other pattern. You can see now that it doesn't actually fill the pattern anymore, it just has 3 events within 7. And the division is how many times the input pattern is divided. And then here we can open multi-map, so you can map the output to 7 more parameters if you like. So you could also change the polarity and set a different modulation depth. Gest XY is a gesture recorder and player. You can move the circle on the XY surface to record, then play back and even loop the result. The dimensions can be mapped individually to up to 3 targets each, and the gesture playback can also be triggered with incoming MIDI notes. So here we have the XY surface, so I can simply click and hold the mouse and then draw. You can make it as simple or complicated as you want, or whatever shape. You can see it automatically plays back right away. You can click on play to play again. Stop if you want to stop it. And here you can turn looping of the gesture on. So when I click on play, it will just continuously loop. Then here we've got transport sync. So if this is turned on, then the playback will start with live playback. Then we also have speed for the whole gesture, so how fast it's played back, from 0, so not played back at all the way to 999%. And then of course, one of the most important things is that we can map it. So here, if you click on this one, you can open the mappings, and you have the x-axis and the y-axis that can be mapped to 3 parameters each. They also have polarity and modulation depth as the previous devices that I've explained. So if I click on play here, you can see the x-axis and y-axis, what parameter output you would get. So maybe let's map this one to the filter cutoff and then this one to the delay, and then we can just play it back. And if you want a different gesture, you can just simply click and draw again. And last but not least, there is the possibility to use MIDI notes to trigger the gesture playback. So I could set the MIDI input. I'm going to set it to 2, and then you can set if it should be pre-effects, post-effects, post-mixer. In this case, it doesn't matter at all because I only have a MIDI clip on the track and that's empty otherwise. And then if you want this to function so that MIDI notes from somewhere in the live set or even any inputs can trigger the gesture playback, then make sure that this is turned on, and I can now just maybe click on stop and then click on play. And you can see each time a note is sent from the second MIDI track, you can see that it turns up and it basically starts to play back again. KeyMod allows you to use selected MIDI notes as trigger and modulation sources that then can be mapped to any parameter in the live set. The incoming MIDI notes can be distributed to the 8 lanes using the MIDI learn mode. Because of the way KeyMod functions, since it uses MIDI notes to trigger parameter changes, that means that it's best used on audio tracks, because on MIDI tracks it would basically make the MIDI notes that are used to trigger parameters make a sound as well. Of course, you can still use it to modulate or even automate parameters on MIDI tracks, since you can map to anything that is mappable in the live set. So the first thing we're going to have to do is unfold the MIDI routing here. And then we can select the MIDI input. And I have the second track that is a MIDI track, so I'm going to select this one. And then you would have to select if you want pre-effects, post-effects, or post-mixer. Generally, you would use pre-effects most often. In my case, it doesn't matter because I don't actually have anything on the MIDI track where it would make a difference. So I have prepared a MIDI clip here on the second track, and I have the notes from C3 to C4 in the C major scale here that I would like to use as the triggers. And so the only thing I have to do then is click here on Learn, start playback, and then you will see that it will automatically change to C3 to C4 here. You can also do the same thing by clicking Learn, and you can change the position that you want, so which lane. To do that manually by simply playing the MIDI notes live that you want to use as triggers. That's already it. All the notes have been assigned, and you could see that MIDI note learn turned itself off automatically after that as well. Okay, so now we best map to a parameter, and so I'm going to map this to the high cut filter here, and you can see that we've got polarity and modulation depth, or as it's called here, range, as in the other devices, but we have two different modes here. So you can either use modulation or you can use automation. So when I click on this, it switches to remote, and then you can set the range for the parameter values of the mapped parameter. So if you want to make the range smaller, you're able to do that. You could also switch it around, so you could even go from 100% to 0%. But I'm going to switch back to modulation, and I'm actually going to set this back to the original here. And now we have different trigger types that you can use. The first one is gate, and with gate, when a note is sent, it will go to the maximum value, and once you let it go, it will go back to the minimum. And I actually, to make it easier to see what I'm doing, I have a keyboard monitor here, so I can open that. And I'm going to have to stop the MIDI clip first. And now let's start playback. That's gate. Next up, we've got ramp. And with ramp, note on generates a ramp, and it has some extra parameters that you can set. So you can, but let's just maybe try it first. So we're going to play back. So you could see it basically went up. If I set this to 100, then let's try this again. You can see it starts from the beginning, so it depends on the modulation depth here as well. And then we can also decide on the polarity, so you could set it to minus. So you could see that then basically the direction of the ramp and the change in the values of the parameter is reversed. Then we have the length of the ramp. So I could set it, for example, to say 1 bar. Let's play that again. So it takes 1 bar to finish the ramp. And then we have phase offset as well. So let's try that. So you could see, like when I set it to 100, there's basically a delay due to the phase offset that is created. You can also turn this down to minus 100 or anything in between. Then we have RT, which means ramp retrigger. If it's turned on, you can play or send the note again and it would retrigger the ramp. And when I turn it off, the ramp would finish first before you can retrigger it. You can see I could press the C3 again and nothing happened. It just finished its job. And then we also have RS, which is ramp reset. So right now, when I'm playing it with it off, it stays at the maximum. But if you would want it to return to the minimum, then you could turn this on and you can see now you don't hear anything because the filter is all the way down. So you could see that it reset itself. That's ramp. Next up, we've got loop, which is similar because it also creates a ramp, but that ramp will be looped as long as the MIDI note is held. You can see it also has polarity, length, and phase offset. And it also has the ramp retrigger. It does not have ramp reset because that happens automatically through the looping. So I'm just gonna start playback again. And if I change the polarity, it would go backwards. And of course, we can adjust the length and phase offset, and the rest works the same. Next up, we've got random. With random, a random value is generated for the map parameter, and with range, you can adjust the range of that as well. And if I say turn it down to 20%, you can see the random values stay within a small range only. Let's turn it all the way back up. And last but not least, we've got toggle. And with toggle, you basically toggle between minimum and maximum value each time a MIDI note comes in. LFX has two LFOs and allows you to combine their outputs in a variety of mathematical ways. Each LFO offers 6 different waveforms, but maybe let's map the output first here to a parameter. I'm going to map it here to add FM. And then we can go through the different waveforms. So we've got sine, sawtooth up, sawtooth down, triangle, square, and random. Both LFOs have the same settings, so they have the same amount and the same types of waveforms and also the other parameters they offer. So the rate can be set to either hertz or note measures. In hertz, you can set it from 0 hertz, which would mean no modulation output, all the way to 40 hertz. And in note measures, you've got 32 bars up to 64th notes. And then we've got the LFO amount, so you can adjust it downwards from 100% to 0, which would mean no modulation output again. And as I said, for LFO, everything's the same. Then you can see here you've got 3 different displays. So the individual outputs of the LFOs, so LFO1 and LFO2, you can see right now LFO2 is off because amount is currently set to 0%. So I can just increase it maybe to 100% as well. And then here you can see their combined output depending on the mathematical settings, how they're supposed to be combined, and then also depending on the summing type. And so here we've got plus, which means you add to 2 LFO outputs together. Subtract means that LFO2 output is subtracted from LFO1. The X means that LFO1 is multiplied with LFO2. This one means that LFO2 is divided from LFO1. And the percentage means that it divides the 2 LFOs and outputs the remainder. And you can see it creates a wildly different output depending on the settings. I'm going to set it back to plus right now. And then here below we've got the summing type. And we've got 3. So fold means that values over 1 are reduced by 1 plus the amount that exceeds 1. Wrap means any values over 1 are reduced by 2 and negative values are increased by 2. And clip means that it basically clips hard any values that go over the max. or min set. Then we've got the smoothing, so the results of the combined output of the LFOs can be smoothed. You can set it from 0% all the way to 100%. And then we've got min and max settings for the summing. So you could also limit that in a way if you want the parameter output not to be all the way. And then, of course, here we've got the modulation polarity again and modulation depth. They work exactly the same as in the other devices. And last but not least, you can actually map to up to 8 parameters anywhere in the live set. LFOS is an extremely lightweight MIDI LFO designed to modulate just one parameter in the live set and to conserve your computer resources at the same time. And while the feature set is quite limited, it still boasts 9 LFO waveforms. So first we've got the map button, just one as I've mentioned, and we could maybe map that to the low pass here. And we've got polarity and modulation depth, as we've seen in the other devices. Here you've got an LED for the modulation, and you can see a display of the currently selected waveform. So maybe let's play this back and then try out the different waveforms. So sample and hold is last. And then, of course, you can set the LFO rate, and you can either do that free, so not synced to live's tempo in hertz, all the way up to 80 hertz, or you can do it in note measures from 64th notes all the way to 32 bars, or you can do it in 16ths. P-SEQ is a 32-step modulation step sequencer that can be synchronized with live's transport or triggered by incoming MIDI or audio sources. In essence, it's a parameter sequencer that combines 3 different step sequencers into a single device. So here on the right-hand side, we have 4 mapping options. So I'm actually going to map the first one to the filter cutoff here. And we have modulation polarity as well as depth again, but we also have a smoothing option. I'm just going to play it to explain the smoothing. So when you look here at the filter cutoff, how it reacts with smoothing at 0%. You can see that the steps are really sharp, whereas if you turn up smoothing, I'm just going to turn up to the max to 100%. You can now see that here the smoothing makes the whole thing more fluid between the different steps for the parameter. Down below here we have the playback direction, so we've got forward, backwards, forward and backward, or random. Here you can decide on the number of steps that you want to have. You can take it down from 1 all the way up to 32, and you can simply draw in. Basically, you can just click to set the values for each step. Down here, you can turn individual steps off or on, of course. And when you click on this rend button, you can randomize which steps should be active. So you can see that it gets changed. And here you can reset all the steps. With these, you could set all the values of the steps at once. So if I turn this up, you can see they all basically get the same value, even though it does not necessarily look the same everywhere. And I'm actually going to take it down to 16 again for the steps. And here on the right side, you can actually randomize the steps, so the values for the steps. And that depends on the setting here as well. So this is the range that you can set. So if I set it all the way here, the lowest value can be this one and the highest this one. And if I click on the dice again, you can see all the values are within that range. Then we've got scramble. So you change the position of the steps randomly, but not the values themselves. Here you can move the steps to the right, the left. You can increase the value of each step or take it down. And then here we've got the different options for the playback mode. You can either have it synced to Live's transport, so when the transport started, it starts playing. And the speed is determined by this setting, so you can set it in note values. So for example, if I set it to a half note, it will move to the next step after a half note. And alternatively, you can use a trigger. So we've got two options. You've got audio, that's the first one. It's selected by default when you turn on trigger. And you've got a threshold that you can set for how many triggers should be created. So you can take it all the way down. So now you see there's no triggering. And the higher I take it, the more triggers are created. And then you also have MIDI as a trigger input, and then you can select a source. So this could be any external source or any of the MIDI tracks that you have in the live set. So I actually have a MIDI clip here on track 2. And in this case, it's not specific MIDI notes are triggered, but any MIDI note. And so then you can also select if it should be pre-effects, post-effects, or post-mixer. Generally, you would want pre-effects or post-effects. In this case, it doesn't matter because I do not have anything else on the track but the MIDI clip. Swing only works if Live's transport is used. So if I click back on transport, you see now swing is blue, and you can turn it on, and then you can set the amount of swing that you want. And gate is available either in transport or in one of the trigger modes. And this basically sets the note length of the trigger. So if I turn it down, you see that nothing's happening anymore. So there's no triggering, so no changes of the mapped parameter. And if I turn it up, so like if it's a very low value, it kind of just creates a little pulse, and you can turn it all the way up to basically have the full effect. Here you can reset the sequence, and you can also set if and when the step sequencer should be reset. So basically start from the beginning. So either you have it off, then it's not being reset at all. You can set it to 1 bar, 2 bars, 4 bars, or sync to the transport. So each time Live's transport starts up again, it would also start from the beginning. KeyMod is a trigger random modulator. It combines audio input from the track with a transient threshold detector to trigger a random generator, which can be mapped to any parameter in the live set for modulation. It can also generate MIDI notes that can be used as an input source on another MIDI track in the live set via track routing. So let's start with mapping. I'm going to map that here to the formant color. And then you can see we've got modulation polarity and depth again. And here we have the different options for creating triggers that will then generate a random value for the map parameter. So the manual option is this trigger button here. So you can either just click this with a mouse, or you could MIDI or key map it. And alternatively, or like that's actually the first option, technically, you have sensitivity. So this is the transient detector. And so we're going to start playback and then dial in how many transients are detected and thus triggers generated. You could also go all the way up. That would generate more triggers. And of course, you could also combine the two if you wanted to. Now, here we've got the settings for random minimum and random maximum. So basically for the map parameter, if you don't want the whole range, which of course is also dependent on the setting here for the modulation depth, you could adjust the settings and say, okay, you want it from 17% only to 73% in this case. So then the randomly generated values would be reined in somewhat. So here with the parameter, you can see that since random values are generated, they basically jump from one to the next. If you don't want this and want this to be more fluid between the different values, then you can use the smoothing and set it up to 100 milliseconds. And then below here, which is not connected to the mapping, it's just connected to the triggers, because whenever a trigger happens, a note is generated. Then you could set the pitch, the velocity and duration for the note that you want to generate. So for example, I could say, let's set it to C5. So you can see you can type it in. You can also use the mouse to kind of go up and down. And you can adjust the velocity to your liking, and as well as the duration of the note in milliseconds. I'm just going to leave it like this. And if you actually want to use this note output, you can just go to any other MIDI track that you have a MIDI instrument on. Simply select the MIDI track that KeyMod is on. And then here on the second drop down, you would choose KeyMod. And then of course, you're gonna have to either set monitoring to in, or you could arm the track in question, and then a MIDI note is generated, or better actually MIDI notes. We're gonna get to that in a second. And you can hear that the generated note, or actually notes, are following the rhythm of the triggers. And if I unfold this here, you can see that you have 7 further options for mapping, each with polarity and modulation depth, as well as random min and max setting and smoothing. And there are 7 more options to generate MIDI notes. So as soon as you have routed the output from KeyMod to another MIDI track, all of those MIDI notes would be triggered. You can't just set this and think that only C5 is triggered, but since they're all set to C1, C1 is also triggered. If you want to just trigger C5, you would have to make sure that all of them are set to C5, or of course you could set them to other pitches as well. So I could say, okay, I'm gonna take G5, maybe C4, and maybe G3, and then I'm actually gonna repeat those to make sure that it's not C1. So I'm going to just use C5 here. For the example, I'm just going to leave velocity in duration like this. And you can just play that now. And this even works if I mute the track, so the first one, so I can play back. Curve Modulate enables 7 parameters to be mapped to a dial, each of which can be affected by a breakpoint curve. Depending on the set breakpoint curve, this can result in wildly different modulations for each map parameter. So here you can see the 7 map options. I'm actually going to map the first 4 to send B of each track here in the live set. Mostly so you can see how the breakpoint curves can affect the setting of the sends very differently. You can see here we've got polarity and modulation depth as we have in the other devices as well. And right now I can just simply increase the amount here and the sends follow along. But if I click here on the triangle, I can show the curves as well. And then we have 2 buttons. First edit and then on off. So if I click on edit, it actually shows you the curve. And with on off, you can turn it on or off again. So I'm going to turn all of these on. And here you can see you've got pre-configured breakpoint curves and they're different from each other. So I'm just gonna move the dial again and you can see that the sends now behave quite differently from each other. And of course, if you change the polarity and the modulation depth settings, you can make the changes even more drastic as well. And to edit the breakpoint curves or create one, you can simply click to create one. If you want to delete it again, you can just click on a breakpoint while holding Shift. And if you hold Option on Mac or Alt on Windows, you can drag to create a bend in the curve. And of course, you can use Curve Modulate in conjunction with other devices in the pack. So for example, I could drag the LFOS in, click on Map to map it to a mount. And now this happens on its own, although here, to make sure that it moves through the whole breakpoint curve, I would set it to 100%. Map Expander allows you to route the output of other Modulator Plus devices into it, providing additional modulation destinations this way. It is compatible with KeyMod, EuclidLFO, Gest XY, KeyMod, LFOS, and LFX. For this to work, you have to click here on this triangle, and now you can select the track that the device is on. So for example, with the LFOS, you can click on here, and then here on the post mixer, you would select LFOS. And now you can see the modulation from LFOS is now shown here. Now you have 8 additional mapping destinations that you could map to any parameter in the live set. You can also select another track. So I have the other devices on other tracks. So I'm going to select 2 now, and then you've got KeyMod here, and you could see that you have actually the outputs for X, Y, and Z for KeyMod. And if I select track 3, you have EuclidLFO, because I have that on that track. as an option. And with track 4, I actually have Gest XY on it, and you have Gest XY, so the X and the Y as an option. And I also have LFX on that track, and you can map that as well. And each time you can see the output. So you have the 8 mapping targets that you could set, and you have modulation, and you have polarity and modulation depth again, but you also have remote, so you could, instead of modulated, automate it, and then the range for the parameter can be set as a min and max here. Modulate offers 7 equal modulation routings from a single dial source. You can also add a lag for each mapping target. So here we've got the 7 mapping targets. I'm going to do the same as previously and map it to %B, so you can see how the lag works. We've got polarity and modulation depth again, and right now we can just change the amount, and so they all react the same way. But we can also turn lag on for each, or maybe not for the first one, and add a lag time actually in %. I'm going to set this one to 100. You can of course also use the mouse up and down to increase it. And now if I change the amount, you can see the higher the lag time, the more there's a delay for the reaction. And of course, you could also combine that with the other devices in the pack. We finally made it through all the devices in Modulators Plus. If you have any questions, you're welcome to leave them in the comments below. You can find the link for the pack in the description as well, linked up top. And I'll see you next time. Until then, bye!